I now call to order this work session of the Anchorage Assembly regarding AO 2022-14, waiving fees as an economic stimulus in response to COVID-19 public health emergency. Hey folks.
People in the back. Claire, Chris, that's you.
It's Friday, April 15, 2022. We're noticed from 3:10 to 4:10 p.m. It's about 3:14 now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let's go around the room with introductions, starting with Mr. Weddleton.
Cheryl coming back?
Peter Pearson.
Thanks, Alto.
Oh.
Forrest Dunbar.
Austin Quinn Davidson.
Christopher, but I gotta apologize, I can only stay 15 minutes.
Suzanne LaFrance.
We can end it now.
And then, do we have anyone on the line?
Mr. Rivera is on the line, and also Ms. Camacho.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. And I believe we are expected to be joined by Mr. Whitfield and Mr. Lyon on the line as well.
Dave Whitfield, Planning Department here.
Great, thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Is there anyone else from the administration on the line?
Christine Shepton from Office Management and Budget, I'm here.
Oh, great, thank you.
Was that Cheryl?
No. Christine, would you say your last name again, please?
Chestnut?
Chestnut?
Yes, N-U-T. Chestnut, like chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
How many times did you have to say that?
Thank you for that. Okay, great. And I just want to note that the documents are available online at muni.org. If you click on Assembly and click on Work Sessions at the top, you will find AO 2022-42 and the summary of the economic effects, general government. So before we turn to Mr. Gates, I just want to ask the sponsors if they have any comments they want to make. Mr. Dunbar, Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, we know that affordable housing is a crisis in this municipality right now, and we're aware that this this resolution will not solve that problem this summer. The best time to have done this is last year. Good news is we did do it last year, although we did it at a slightly smaller scale. We used ARPA funds to waive certain building fees last year. And so this would waive it for this building season. Of course, most folks have already permitted, and the former administrative staff we talked about this begged us not to make this retroactive because it was so complicated to try to refund people. So what it does is, for the folks that haven't put in their permits yet, it helps them this year. But it really helps next summer's building season. Because this will last for a year under this language from when we pass it. So we pass on the 26th, so it'll last till April 26th of 2023. And a lot of the permitting will happen probably January, February, March of next year. So I'm very open to ideas about maybe some of these specific fees we shouldn't, maybe some of them we should increase, maybe there's another fee you think that we left out, and if the administration has ideas, very open to that. But in general, what we're trying to do is reduce the cost of building the city, and I think it's a very good long-term investment, short and long-term investment of the Rescue Plan Act funds. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar.
Sure, I'll just add that this is Austin Quinn Davidson, that I spoke briefly with Mr. Trombley. He had a conflict today, and he's gone next week. So I don't know if was it Christine might be a person to give us feedback, but I think Suzanne and Forrest and I put this together. We're happy to hear feedback from the administration. I think this is probably something that they'll support as well, but Adam and I weren't able to connect. So I guess any feedback from the administration, and then any ideas from Assembly members. I know that Mr. Weddleton questioned whether this was sort of the right time to do this. Like, did we want to wait until we did more ARPA evaluation? I think with all of the other possibilities for ARPA, that made sense. I think for us, we were thinking, let's try to get in on this building season and not wait, but maybe that moment has passed. So anyway, with those comments, I think just take questions and ideas for how we maybe should make changes.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. So I'll go to Ms. Zalatel and then Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to have to leave in a minute for the school run, but I will be offering an amendment to basically stating the Assembly passed AO 2003-97 as amended to waive the associated fees pursuant to AMCR 21.20.007. That's the affidavit and permit fees to register an ADU. When we talked about the ADU tax abatement, one of the things I heard back from particularly Girdwood is that they need an accurate count of ADUs. So any kind of incentive to get them registered is very helpful in the overall information collecting around affordable housing. So hopefully this will be the incentive. It's not a big amount. I believe it's about $146 per unit, but hopefully that will be helpful and it will give us a better picture moving forward as we tackle affordable housing issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, thanks. A couple of comments on this. I appreciate Austin mentioning that, you know, it seems to make more sense to have everything we want to do with our 1,000 different things and then prioritize them and then make a choice. And I've thought that before, but particularly when I see this now and see that this is something over 10% of what we would be getting. You know, this is substantial leap into it without looking at other things. And some questions that come to me is that, you know, are building fees a barrier to more house building? And, you know, they're not certainly cheap, but if permit fees and inspection fees are keeping you from doing a project, your project shouldn't be done. They're just not that high that it would be a go or no go on a decision. And if it is something that will increase rezones and, you know, building and so on, then you need to factor in more staff, because right now they have just barely the staff they need. And if it does cause an increase in rezones and things like that, that's going to be, who would do it? You know, you're going to do what is a huge cost for building, and that's delays. So if you cut the permit fees, so that if it works and people come for more projects, and you don't have the staff to do them, you will delay inspections, delay permitting, and that is the biggest cost for any developer. So this could backfire and actually hurt development. Some other things that I know would be on my list for the ARPA funds would be scanning and digitizing all the records of public works. And if you've ever seen people go in the old days, they bought scrolls, 4 big scrolls for projects. It was Byzantine. And those are stored now, decades of those. And it's crazy. If you're doing research for projects or replats, you have to go get these paper scrolls. You have to find them, you have to store them. So they started digitizing them, but they have a lot more to do. So it's been very successful, but they need $1.5 to $2 million more to finish it off. But that would have a benefit forever if that's done. Another is we have our land use plan, and we have areas targeted for rezones that the city has taken on as that we will do those. But what we've seen is we don't have the money to do it. So when a developer or property owner wants a rezone, if it's in the strategic rezone area, we pay for their rezone. But what makes a lot more sense is to do the whole area instead of piece by piece. And that should spur development. You R1A, I don't know what it is, Dave could fill it in, but if it's to R4, do the whole area, and then you know that you're doing development where we think it should be prioritized. You're helping out dramatically the whole area. So that, and I don't know if it's either or, but when you're sucking up 10% for this, it may mean you don't have the money for the other stuff. But those are, you know, digitizing in the target rezones, I think would be far more than this, and would help housing. Because a lot of those target rezones are to increase, so you can do multiple family housing easier in different locations. However, if you go forward with this, and I won't be there to help you with it, they did get a request. Easy Park has some substantially higher costs for parking tour buses and stuff, and tourism is still a little bit tentative, so maybe you've got that and consider that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Go ahead, Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, John, were you and Suzanne planning to bring an amendment about the buses?
I could watch you do it.
Well, it's on the 26th.
It's on the 26th. You will
Oh,
be
at
here?
the beginning.
Yeah, I'll be gone in the beginning.
Oh. I think I'm gonna have to process that offline or else it's gonna get bad here. Suzanne, were you planning to bring that amendment? I mean, I would support it, but I just wanna make sure when someone's bringing it.
Yes, I thought that we might
We can do it
work
together.
together.
Sure.
Next in the queue is Mr. Constant.
So, I don't know that I agree with the idea of covering the costs for Easy Park to create parking fees for buses downtown where they have historically given them. And this is a very strong point of contention where Easy Park, the Community Development Authority, is seeing easy money that they're trying to extort now out of the marketplace downtown. And so I was thinking about it from a different angle, that Easy Park and the Community Development Authority may need to justify why they're going to increase these costs on the businesses, because in some ways it feels like they're working to take from that industry so they can put money into other industries, and that shifting is maybe within the mission, maybe not, but I don't know that it would be a wise use of rescue plan money to pad the wealth of the Community Development Authority. So I just want to add some caution to that. And I know that there's a little parking rebellion growing in the downtown because of the manner by which ACDA and Easy Park is implementing its mission in the downtown. And so there are some conversations that are probably going to start with members of the community on that topic, but that's not what we're here for. But John, I wanted to speak a little bit to the development costs that you talked about, and I don't know that I support $7 million, but I do support figuring out how to reduce the burden of costs on the development. The permitting, in particular, the bureaucracy, the actual paper, is about a third of the cost of the development now in housing. And it is, according to every developer I talk to, the element that's crushing their potential development. You're right, time is a big factor in that, I will concede, especially when delays push them over to the next building cycle in Alaska. That has massive consequences for any project. But my friends in the business continue to tell me that they spend 1/3 of their money on paper moving with departments and bureaucracies.
Mr. Weldon, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, that's not permit fees. It's not the things that are waived here. It is the cost of meeting the requirements, which include, Title 23, that they have to build a thicker wall, that they think they have to, or planting the single tree that's required in the front yard. Those are the things. You're not dealing with those here.
Well,
This
these
is not
are
a big
part of that.
cost.
These are part of that.
We're not
And so-
saying change the rules, though. We're just waiving some of the fees.
Right, I agree with you there. I agree with you there. It's definitely, all of these are one subset of all of that. If it's a Venn diagram, this is a very small part of a very big problem.
Next is Mr. Peterson, Ms. Quinn Davidson, and then Mr. Dunbar, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I thought it was in the queue, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to remind everyone that Visit Anchorage is projecting a potential record tourist season this year. The companies that own those buses are multinational corporations, and not sure that any reduction is necessary if the numbers that they're talking about actually come to fruition. So that's something we should be taking into account. And as far as the old plans from years ago, I've heard someone compare it to try to read the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I don't know what that would cost to do that. It would be a heck of a project. I know the fire department actually had a guy that had an office in the library that was doing digitizing all their old records. So, and I don't know how much that cost, but he was there for a year or two doing it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weddleton, you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah, just answer. I think they $1.5 to $2 million because they've been digitizing stuff, so they know how fast it's going and what it costs. I believe Dave Whitfield could probably clarify that, but it's on that order.
Is he on the phone?
I believe so.
Yes, I believe so. Mr. Whitfield, do you want to clarify on that point?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I believe we had quotes for the digitizing project in the neighborhood of 1.7 million, 1.8 million.
Additional?
Is that additional?
No, that was part of a project that we had under the previous administration to try to digitize a lot of the microfiche, I should say all of the microfiche that the planning department and the development services department has. Unfortunately, given the cost of that project, we weren't able to do that. But that's still out there. We're still looking for funding to do it. while that cost, 1.7, 1.8 million, was what we thought it was going to cost, that was largely due to the time frame that we had to actually do the project. We had a very short window, I think about 2 months. So some of that cost could be associated with the short timeline of completion. But I still believe Mr. Weddleton is correct. It is a very expensive project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. So next is Ms. Quinn Davidson, then Mr. Dunbar, and then Mr. Constant.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, I'm gonna wait so Dean can hear this. I was just wondering if Dean could speak to the amount, because I thought it was less. I thought it was 2.4 million, but I haven't seen, this is the city, I haven't seen this yet, so maybe it has gone up. Oh, it says 3.5. Oh, okay, no, you're right, John. For fiscal year 2022, 3.5, FY 23, 2.5. For some reason, Dean, when you produced this, I had a number of 2.4 in my head. Can you tell me what that number was all about?
Yes, if I remember correctly, when we were first discussing this ordinance, it was just the permit fees, Title 21 and 23. And I think when I came out with that 2.4, 2.5 million, just based on the prior fee waivers. But we added in several other fee waivers from Title 16 permits and transportation permits. And so the numbers changed. And this is a lot more reliably received from OpenP than what we roughly estimated at the beginning of the project.
Anything else, Ms. Quinn Davidson? Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I appreciate that. So 6 million, not 7 million here. And it is substantial. It is a substantial chunk of funding. I still think it is valuable, and I don't think it has to be in competition with the digitization project. I think it could be, both and. I guess I want to hear from the administration. Is anyone here that can speak to sort of which parts of this, because we've heard from the administration that they are concerned with this, but I haven't really heard specifics. So which parts of this do you not want us to go forward with? What parts do you want us to change? Is there anyone from the administration that can say, what parts of this do you consider valuable, which parts should we remove?
Mr. Whitfield or Mr. Lyon?
Madam Chair, David Whitfield. If I could just make a couple comments on the ordinance. It seems that in some of the whereas, or at least in one whereas statement, it seems to waive all fees associated with Title 21. I'm sorry, not in the whereas. Section 1 waives all fees associated with Title 21, and then Section 4 waives fees for the biennial bed and breakfast fee. My comment to that would be that the biennial bed and breakfast fee is included in Section 1, so it's a little bit duplicative. You could remove it, you could leave it. I don't believe it's necessary, but it would all be encompassed within that Title 21 fees. And I believe Ms. Zalatel has wanted to waive the ADU owner occupancy fee as well. That would be covered under Section 1. So you could make that amendment or leave it in. It's either way, it's fine by me.
That's great.
And I would say that generally, I'm supportive of incentivizing development. Certainly this is going in that direction. One concern that I do have is this equates to roughly $400,000 in lost revenue for the planning department. So assuming we get the ARPA funds, that should be made up, but if we don't, we'll have to figure out where we are going to make up that revenue loss in our budget. So, other than that, I think the ordinance looks fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Any follow-up, Mr. Dunbar?
No, that's great substantive feedback. So if section 4 is redundant, then we will delete it. And if Ms. Zolotel's amendment is also redundant, we will struggle to convince her of that fact. The ARPA funds, that's absolutely.
I don't think he said hers was redundant. He said the B&B fee was redundant.
No, he said both. He said,
Okay.
didn't you say that the ADU
Yeah.
fee would be, included in section 1?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So hopefully we can do that. Our intent absolutely is to make this contingent on receivable and spending of the ARPA funds and making all the departments whole. So, planning is worried about that. That's sort of the basis of this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, and thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Next is Mr. Constant, and then Mr. Littleton.
Thanks, I have to get out of here in just a minute, but two things. Mr. Peterson, in the context of big corporations, tour companies getting the benefit of that parking, it's the hotels who are going to get pinched most in the downtown. It's not so much around Union or the places where those big companies are staging tour companies during the day, but it's really the folks, these are the loading zones around the hotels. And so, most of the hotels are probably international ownership or national ownership, but mostly they do support people being in the downtown and staying. That's the complaints I'm hearing from merchants in the downtown and hoteliers is this fee is going to crush them. And they'll lose their $60,000 a spot or something along those lines that they're being told they have to pay anew. And so to the Anchorage Historic Hotel and a number of other places, that could be pretty prohibitive. And that's my last comment on this. I will say I also have a project that I want to see moving forward through ARPA, and that's I want to wire fiber optic cable into all of the rec centers, the McDonald Center, the Fairview, Mountain View, Muldoon, Boys and Girls Clubs, Bernard, and create, or if not there, somewhere else, permanent, high-quality broadband internet available to the public to come and stream at those public locations so kids don't have to go to McDonald's to do their homework in the pandemic. And so that's the one that I'm kind of working on with the Parks Department. It's a capital outlay of about $400,000 plus a $50,000 a year annual service expense. And so to me, that's my number one thing that I'm working on is to make sure the kids have access to internet so they can stay on their studies if things go bad. Anyway,
Charming that you think that's what they use it for.
oh yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
That's what they used it for.
Mr. Littleton?
I got 2 points, I guess. One on that is we closed the rec centers during COVID, and we had to go to, they'll have to go to McDonald's anyway.
No, the rec centers would still be broadcasting, the service would be available, kids
Oh,
can
they
sit in the
park
parking lot at the
outside.
rec center and not at some commercial location. That's what kids were doing to gain access when they didn't have it at home, was they're going to commercial properties that provided internet services to them so they could do homework. And this is a scenario that raised up in the pandemic, and it's an economic marker in our community. And it's one that can be served in every part of the municipality, Eagle River, downtown, Mountain View, West Anchorage, Cross Temple, the AT&T Center, maybe somewhere in South Anchorage. But an option for people who don't have an option.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Littleton?
I don't remember where our rec center is. I'm the district very well. So, Mr. Whitfield, since you're here, were the cut in fees to actually increase any kind of housing and other development? I mean, do you expect that would happen? And I mean, what kind of staffing would you need if this increased your workload by 10 or 20%?
Thank you, Mr. Littleton. If we were to increase workload by 10 to 20%, I believe I would need at least one other planner and perhaps one other admin person to process permits.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Littleton. Mr. Gates?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, listening to something. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just listening to some discussion about the effects, and like Mr. Whitfield mentioned about staffing and taking sponsors, that waivers be contingent on actual use of the ARPA funding for these waivers. I think I would suggest an amendment, probably an S version that I intended to start. I think I started, excuse me. The effective date of this should probably be contingent. It's right now immediately upon passage, and I intended to have it start first of the month following passage, the month following passage and approval, so that's usually zero for some of these fee waivers. But because there might be, I guess, between the waivers and ARPA funding, some bridge financing needed to keep like inspectors and plan reviewers employed, perhaps the effective date should be upon receipt of the ARPA funding and then the fee waivers go into effect. And so I just wanted to put that thought out there in terms of how we're in the effective date sections.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Ms. Quinn Davidson and then Mr. Dunbar.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So a couple things. Yeah, Dean, it would be great if you could work on an S version that incorporates, I guess, should we do the motor coach or do that as an amendment? Sounds like there's some disagreement about that. Yeah. So sorry, maybe we don't need an S version, but maybe it's an amendment for that motor coach for Suzanne and me, I guess. And then I wanted to ask Mr. Whitfield, I think John just threw out 10 to 20%, right, John? You were just kind of, yeah, which is fine. Do you think that, and then you answered his question, do you have any idea, is it 10 to 20% this might increase development by? Do you have any idea what kind of workload? I guess I'm trying to ask, is that the right number?
Yes, thank you very much. I did pull the numbers from 2019 through 2021 to include the 2020 year where we had the 25% COVID discount. Now, that's not a true, accurate number, I don't think, because there was a lot of uncertainty in development at that time, and I think that some projects that may have actually occurred that next development season probably didn't happen in 2020, but just simply looking at the numbers, we had in 2019 220 cases that the planning department processed. In 2020, the year of the COVID discount, we had 175. And then thereafter, in 2021, we processed 208 cases. So we actually decreased in the number of cases. Now, I do believe that in this particular case, you're going to see an increase. How much exactly that's going to be, I'm unsure. I think that you're probably, Mr. Whittleton's probably right. If we do have an increase, it'll probably be in that 10 to 15% range, which would absolutely require me to hire, at a minimum, another planner. At the current time, my staff is operating at maximum capacity. They're processing individually 4 to 5 cases a month, which is a substantial amount. So if we increase at all, I'll need to hire another planner. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Ms. Quinn Davidson, did you have any follow-up on that?
I wasn't in queue, but since you asked, I might as well. We've needed additional planners for a long time, so from my perspective, if we could use this as sort of a capacity building grant and add another planner and then build that into our budget moving forward, I mean, that's a good thing for now and for later. Right? Would you agree, Mr. Whitfield, or do you think that's not generally needed?
Ms. Quinn Davidson, I think you're 100% correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We could start by including it in the ARPA funding if we wanted, or we try to build it into the budget. My question is for Dean. You talked about changing the effective date to when ARPA funding is received. I guess I'm hesitant to do that because I think members of the public will start inquiring, and then it is really difficult to tell them a date because we just don't know when the federal government actually pays us. I'm comfortable with a couple of weeks or even a month or two sort of lag. And so could we, but I understand why you're not going to affect it immediately. Could we do something like change the effective date to when we pass the overall ARPA package? Is there some way to phrase it that way?
I was actually starting to write a note here that's similar to what you're thinking, Mr. Dunbar, upon the appropriation of the ARPA funding.
Yeah.
To backfill these waivers, and then the waivers being effective. So perhaps that what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Alice would say, I thought we would have most of these department heads that would be affected here today to really talk to us about how they would address, I guess, an interim 2 weeks, but that would be helpful information from them.
I agree. But yeah, so we're in agreement though. Don't fund the effective date. It only takes effect when we finally get the check from the federal government, because we just don't want to be on their time frame exactly. We'll do it with the passage of the ARPA funding. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Middleton?
You know, it seemed to me we knew exactly when we would get that check. Didn't we know? They said on this day you get the money.
They said a year from when we received the first tranche, that I think was like the end of May of last year. But I just still have a lot of faith in the federal government giving us an exact date. I
thought they did last time though. I thought we knew the date and we got it.
You could ask the
Yeah.
lady if they know the date. If they
Who knows who's here?
That's a good idea.
Christine.
Ms. Chestnut?
That was open fire.
Ms. Chestnut, are you still with us?
Chestnut's.
Sounds like she might not be online any longer, so that's a good follow-up question as to when we expect to get that money. Anything else, Mr. Middleton?
No, thanks.
Any other members have comments or questions? Mr. Whitfield, do you have anything else you want to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one thing. One thing to consider is making the ordinance effective date maybe in the fall time when we receive most of our entitlement applications. If you do that for a period of a year and you hit fall to fall, you can almost encompass 2 development seasons. So you might get the best bang for your buck, so to speak. Something to consider. But other than that, no. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that suggestion. And I just want to check again if Ms. Chestnut from OMD is online. And if she wanted to add anything, or if anyone else from the administration may have joined since we started. And if so, do those individuals have anything to add? Is there anyone else? Okay. So final call for comments or questions. This item will be before us at the meeting of the 26th. And seeing no one else in the queue, thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. And we are adjourned. Have a nice weekend.